How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Cause and Effect podcast, episode 2 and season 3 of the podcast. Again, we're remote. This has been fun to just have these people on that I've respected in the industry for so long. I used to watch our next guest on the Golf Channel every morning with his infomercials for his training aids, and it's pretty surreal to actually be having a conversation with them. And our next guest, I just want to welcome him on, Martin Chuck. How's it going, Martin? Thanks for meeting with me today.
Ethan, my pleasure, bud. And to viewers, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We're just going to nerd out about the golf swing, talk about some training aids, talk about just the love of teaching. If you want to just introduce yourself a little bit for people that don't know who you are, they probably live under a rock if they don't, but.
So just a nerd in golf. I love the game, grew up in Toronto. When I go on these podcasts, I kind of go through this, I think a product of being in the right place at the right time with some caring, awesome coaches. When I was a young man, my dad got me into a little junior thing with a fella named George Knudson, who I had no idea who he was, but it turns out he was at the time Canada's top golfer, and he was a golf nerd himself. So as a part of his junior academy, there was, and that junior development academy started at a course that was unbelievable, like a top 100 course called the National Golf Club of Canada, which is in Woodbridge, Ontario. And that was magical because it's such a great facility. And there was a director of golf there named Ben Kern, who was an All-American from New Mexico State University, first teamer 3 times, I think. And that plays a role because I eventually went and played golf there. Mo Norman was a famous Canadian that I got to spend a lot of time around when I was a little kid. And for those of you that, know golf lore, you'll understand that Mo was arguably the straightest, most accurate hitter of all time. So, I had a neat little upbringing around these really special people. I had no idea, really. I knew something was pretty cool, and I knew I was lucky, and my game was developing, and that was awesome. And so, I went to college, played junior golf successfully, had some fun, played college golf, had a great time. New Mexico State for 4 years, and then I played professionally for 3 years. And it's nice to get to that level, and you realize, wow, that's a whole new level. And even from there, I felt like I sort of belonged, but it's a grind. It really is. You're on the road, and I got offered a job as a club pro in Palm Desert, California, when I was 26, and I took the opportunity, and really no regrets. And enjoyed being a club pro, helping members develop their game and running their tournaments and running the golf shop, and just being around the game was fun for me, and to get paid to do it was awesome. So I did that for 16 years in 3 places: Palm Desert, California, Indian Ridge Country Club. I moved up to Reno, Nevada, a place called Arrow Creek Country Club. After that, I kept moving farther north, like going back to Canada. I went to Bend, Oregon for 4 years, and then that's when my wife and I started the golf school. And then also the training aid business kind of started at the tail end of Reno, Nevada, but came to fruition while I was living in Bend, Oregon, with the original Tour Striker Training Club, that infomercial you're talking about, that went on the air I think it was the first one on the air 2010. So a while ago, and had fun, ups and downs in the golf business. As you know, the training aid business is not an easy one.
It's tough.
Yeah. And so coaching, I love it. I love meeting people and coaching people and trying to help them.
That's one thing I wanted to talk, you can tell in your content, you can tell when you're in your academies for Tour Striker Academy, it just looks like you're having a blast and you just love it. And
I do.
That's, something that we can relate to. We love teaching. That's why we created the business that we created and started collecting the data that we collected with our Smart Grip. It's like, we just love it. We just want people to love it as much as we do.
Yeah.
And I could see that in all your content, and I admire that a ton. Where does that come from? Does that just come from your mentors and just seeing how they were, or where does that come from?
When I was young, so I got into teaching when I was 16, when I could drive, because George Knudson left the National, started his own private driving range in a neighborhood of Toronto, which was actually not that far from my house. So it was a range you had to be a member of. You paid some fee. It wasn't that much money. It was like $300 a year, but that gave you access to go be able to buy balls at this range. So he kind of kept the great unwashed of golf away. and then made this private driving range where you could be a brand new golfer, beginner. You just had to go agree to, hey, this is the rules of the range. You can't wear a tank top, and you had to be a golfer, sort of. So what happened was, when you joined this range, he would do like a onboarding session where you could come to one of his training sessions, and he basically told you how to hold the club, no funky crazy grips, this little rhythmic way, like 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock shots. And, so he would basically take anybody and show them how to kind of rhythmically move a golf club from a starting form to like a half finishing form and get results pretty quick. And a lot of it was just basically understanding a bit of the face and letting the club catch the ball, and not trying to just smash away. Because I think just smashing away your first few times is a disaster.
Yeah,
it just leads to, a life of disastrous golf. So I was one of his assistants there at 16. So basically what we did was, all those golfers that he trained, he'd offer them jobs, and we loved it because we were paid really well actually for being 16. And then we would basically, so you walk in, hey, I want some golf balls. Okay, here's your little punch card, and here's your golf balls. And then you might sell them a hot dog or a soda or something. They'd go hit balls. And one of us would always go out and walk the range. So we would walk the range while one of us was in the kind of the little building he set up, and it was just a modular thing. And then we would walk the range, and he would say, okay, ask people how they're doing. If they're struggling with curve, teach them about the face and the path. And, and this was like way pre, ball flight laws, or new ball flight laws, but it was, okay, if you're slicing it, your face is open to the path. If you're hooking it, the face is closed to the path. It wasn't rocket science. And then most people couldn't develop. They would force the momentum of the club the wrong way at the wrong time. So George would always say, most problems, and to your point, like, and when you started to develop, most problems happen right here. They happen right here. Like, if you can't get your hands on well, then you're torquing and forcing the club the wrong way. It's really hard to have rhythm. So everything
you're fighting your club.
You're always fighting. You're always fighting, right? And so that's why you see people with worn out golf grips. And I look at grips sometimes, and I've got this little trainer grip in my hand because I just had a few of them laying around. And, they've worn the rubber off the thing somehow. I've never done that in my life. I've had to kind of put fresh ones on, but I've never worn a hole in a grip at the end or down here by my index fingers. And so you're teaching people how to have this bit of rhythm. And through that bit of rhythm, now you can either do it softer or harder, and some people are more physically gifted to go fast than others, which is fine. I would joke at my golf school with the students. I'd have them all there, and I'd go, okay, do you know what my record is for the 100-meter dash? And there'd be a moment of pause because they don't know what to think, right? Okay, they're looking at me. They're going, all right, I don't know, maybe he runs an 11, a 12, or a 10 something. And then I would say, well, my record for the 100-meter dash is 80 meters. I've almost made it once. I always, and it's so, you know what I mean? Like, it's a reference change for people to say, you can have a beautiful golf swing, and maybe you don't generate the horsepower of Tiger Woods, but you can generate your horsepower and hit the ball in the middle of the face and have a lovely time playing golf.
Right.
And that's really all people want.
Yeah.
And once they hit it in the middle of the face nicely, then they get a little bit greedy as far as chasing distance, which I don't begrudge them that, but let's let them hit it in the middle of the face, and then They can chase some distance,
Yeah, we talk about a lot with letting the club pivot relative to the handle, and then let the body pivot with that momentum. But too many people, I feel like when they're learning golf, they're kind of learning more pivot with the body first, and then it's like, oh wait, like we have hands connected to a golf club, like we got to learn all this now. It's like like you're trying to learn how to drive a car, except for now you're learning with like your feet, knees, and elbows, and then you go 10 and 2. It's like little backwards, and you're just like you said, you're just fighting the club, like you're just making it harder than it needs to be. Like, I think a lot of the faults that people kind of occur or kind of encounter in their golf swings are related to just an improper grip. Like, there's this journey that the golf club is on in the golf swing, riding on this like swing plane road, imagining the club face is the car. And it's like, you don't have to detour off that road and go into scary woods and the scary detours off the road if you just understand the proper grip. And I did a big thing that I know you are a huge proponent of it is the waggle. Was that always something that Knudson talked about a lot, was just feeling the weight of the club?
Did he necessarily teach Waggle? I think he did it more unconsciously than consciously, because every time he picked up a club, it was a
Mm.
very distinct waggle that he had, right? So as kids, we were like, okay. And then he had a very distinct kind of motion pattern in his feet, right? So, and the reason I don't have my club, and the one that our friend
The
Chun
compact
sent me,
club. Yeah,
the
yeah, John,
compact
yeah.
club, is because it sits by my
Shout.
couch. And that's where everybody should have a club, by the way, right? Where they relax. Get
Right,
yourself one of those
exactly.
clubs and leave it there. So when you watch golf, you can waggle it and you can look at the face and you can close it and open it. You can create leverage. So,
You
but to
don't
your point
bash
about
into
Knudson,
lamps.
yeah,
Don't
you don't
bash
hurt
into your
pets.
significant
Don't,
other on the
yeah,
couch with you.
yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
So back to the waggle part, it was always, and Knudson had a charity event once, and I'm trying to think of when it was, maybe 1980. And it was at Glen Abbey Golf Club in Toronto, where they longtime host of the Canadian Open.
Mm-hmm.
Great course.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And one of the best back nines ever. And front nine was okay too, but beautiful course. And Knudson he agreed to hit every shot with his eyes closed. And for every stroke he shot over par, he would donate $1,000. And for every shot he under par, whoever the company was would pay $1,000. And he shot 68. So he shot 68 with his eyes closed, no joke.
Wow. That's
And that way he was
unreal.
allowed to walk up to the ball, and obviously there was an element of trust. He's allowed to walk up, aim the face, close his eyes, and hit one. But I'd seen him do it so many times. Like George with his eyes open or George with his eyes closed was like no different.
Yeah.
So
That's
you know what I mean?
crazy.
So
That's so
yeah.
crazy.
But there was a cool thing too. Bryson, I saved it on my phone. Somebody asked Bryson, what are you thinking about when you're swinging? He goes, well, I look at the ball casually, or I look at the ball like forget how he paraphrases it, it's on my phone. And he goes, I'm really just internally trying to mimic the feel that I needed for the shot. So his eyes are outward, but really he's looking inward and just
Mm.
trying to duplicate a feeling to get an outcome that, he wants. And so I tell you what, when I get manipulating the club the wrong way, which I do, and I think everybody does from time to
Yeah.
time, I go to eyes closed swings all the time, because then it brings me back to what you said is more of, okay, feeling the weight of the club and the pivot of the hands, and then the contributing effort of the body, and making the blend one that's more paired rather than one that's overpowered. Because I think it's really easy to, the big muscles to take over the swingers.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, you said driving with your knees and your hips versus just kind of putting your hands on the steering wheel. So, and a great story to that, there was an Ohio State kid. It wasn't Chris Smith, but it was a Smith, and I forget his first name. Played for Ohio State. I was playing in the Monroe Invitational, and that's a highly regarded amateur event in Rochester, New York. And so I show up, and I'm going to go play a practice round. And I see this kid, and I wave at him. I'm going to go join him on the tee. And so as I'm walking up, he's got his feet together, and he just goes and sends one out there like 250, ho-hum with his feet together. And this is before, kids hit at 340, and there was the odd long kid, but it was a different era, a different ball. We just started using metal woods back then. And I honestly think in that tournament, I was still playing a wooden driver, actually, now that I think about it. And it was weird that like some people were playing metal woods and we're like, oh, you're a cheater. It's like nonsense, right? Like
Yeah.
this one kid from Florida, I can't remember his name, could nuke it, and he had this metal wood that he had. And anyway, me as this pure golf purist thought, oh, the game should be, wooden heads, blah blah blah. And I was like 16 or 17 playing this tournament, just old enough to drive myself 4 hours to Rochester from Toronto. And anyway, so I said to him, I go, I think his name was Steve Smith. Anyway, he hits a shot off the tee, and I'm like, dude, what's going on? He goes, well, my coach said I wasn't allowed to play in this tournament unless I played with my feet together. I'm like, huh, okay.
Wow.
So here, yeah, and he played well. Like it was one of those tournaments where you play to make the cut, and then you play match play elimination to see who wins it, like the Western Am. And and so, or was I forget? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the kid played with his feet together the whole practice round and hit it
I love
great.
it.
You
I
know what
love
I
it.
mean? Yeah, did he jeopardize 20 yards possibly? Sure. But, back then when there was only one par four that was for 20 or 30, and then the rest of the par fours were 330 to 400 yards, and you could still hit a 250, that was long. You know what I'm saying? And so, obviously his coach was like, buddy, you're fighting, how the swingers are swinging with your body getting in the wrong way of things. And so, anyway, I
I
thought that
love it.
was a
I
funny
just had a
recollection.
lesson yesterday with one of my juniors,
Yeah,
and she was moving around a little bit too much, starting the downswing kind of with her body a little bit too much. Club was getting stuck behind her, so I just put her feet
yeah,
together and just kind of did a little L to L, 9 to 3,
yeah,
like you were saying with what Knudson was doing, and that's
yeah.
always just the kind of fail safe. If you kind of lose it a little bit, it's like get it
It
back on the
is.
rails, because you just got to kind of have that understanding of, we talk about the hand to handle to face relationship, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to kind of, we go pretty in depth where we talk about like actually pre-activating the hands so that they can actually create the proper dynamics of when they push against the grip. See, most people,
Hmm.
they just grab the club and then try to get it to do certain things, and it just doesn't work. So I love the feet together thing. Any other little kind of drills or things that you saw? I mean, the eyes closed. That's incredible. I mean, I've tried that before, and you better have a good kind of hand to handle the face to body relationship for that. Any other like little tidbits or things that you kind of picked up on that you've used kind of throughout your career?
I think that a lot of, what's interesting is if you're dedicated to being a good player, like if you have that desire to be good, it's an interesting game. Like the onboarding in golf, if you're a little kid, I don't know that any little kid just, goes and says, okay, I'm going to be a good golfer without a little peer group to kind of enjoy the camaraderie or the game with. So luckily as a little kid, I had that. I had my couple of neighborhood kids that were into it. There was a little muni course that I played. I wore the grass off of called Flemington Park Golf Club in Toronto before I got to that next level of being like, chosen to be a part of a junior development thing. And so I had the opportunity to play pure level golf with little kids and enjoy myself. So like the idea of development, little tips is that if you're young, if you have somebody like I always say, hey, I'm a golf coach. I'm not a club pro. I used to be a club pro. I'm a golf coach. I don't have to be nice to you. A club
Yeah,
pro
I've
has
heard
to
you
be
say
nice to
that.
you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
They
I
got to
say
see
I'm
you
going to
for
be honest
dinner
with
in a half hour or see
you,
you in the
right? I want to wave at
clubhouse,
you
and
five
yeah,
times a day. Now as a
yeah,
coach, I get on people. If you have a shitty grip, I just tell them, listen, your grip sucks. I know you've been a bad golfer for 30 years. Here's an opportunity for you to have a better relationship with the team you're swinging by creating the opportunity for leverage, okay, and for rhythm development and power. And so, I'll say, okay, at the top of your swing, the way to the club can sit, in this trail knuckle. And, at address, there's really not much, there's no pressure really there. There's a big argument in, golf coaches that you got to squeeze the shit out of it at address. No, you don't. And yeah, possibly I would say that if I have a nanometer, whatever the hand strength machine
mm-hmm.
is,
Yep.
you know what I mean? So every once in a while, my coaches, for example, I have 5 coaches at my golf camp, and they're all, very good players, and they can all grab this machine and make it, squeeze it to a level that's above most amateur players. Okay. So, as can I, and, maybe just because I've swung this thing all my life, I have strong hands because I haven't
Mm-hmm.
let it go yet. As far
And
I've
you've
never,
molded a lot of hands on clubs, so you're used to kind of
yeah,
manipulating people's hands and working on their
totally.
grips. So we're like massage
And so,
therapists for the hands.
yeah.
For
And
the
so,
yeah.
like, the bottom line is, can people get this thing, in a levered spot versus, I always say, you want the grip across a hand rather than along a hand. And I'll say along a hand's great for putting and it's great for chipping because it's not a speed move. You don't
Right.
need a lot of speed
Correct.
chipping. You don't need a lot of speed putting. But when you're striking, you need that leverage opportunity, and so, learning how to, peacefully put the hands on. And then I'm a big freak about a grip. So I hate when people interlock and go like this
Ugh,
and get their right
yeah.
hand on in the palm. And yet
Yeah.
they might play for years that way because nobody has cared enough to tell them it sucks and to do it
Correct.
the right way. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I always teach an overlap grip until they do it right. And then if they're so desire to do this, so be it.
Got it.
But
Yeah.
my thing is, again, can they feel the weight of the club? Can they move the weight of the club? Do they understand? I like to teach people, hey, this is an inclined, you know, side on game. We stand to the side, we have a target line. The face has a relationship, it has a rate of rotation, it has a back up and in, a down out and forward, and a back up and in again. And can you see this? Can you see this inclined circle? And on that circle, can you see the face rotating on that circle?
Hmm.
And then there'll be argument. Oh, you want to have less rate of rotation, and so I'm like, hey man, you want to be some high level player and practice 5 hours a day, knock yourself out. If you want to have some kind of strong grip and block it, and, have a ton of side bend, knock yourself out. But if you want to just be a nice golfer that doesn't hurt themselves, there's a rate of rotation, there's an inclined circle. The club has to, the face has closure to touch a ball, and then it has some sort of low point. That's an important thing for people to know that, I was hitting balls yesterday. I'm using a Flight Scope Mevo Plus right now, and I quite like it because I can turn on any tile audibly, and it's like low point 5 inches, low point 4.7 inches, low point 5 inches, low point 4.7 inches, and then it's like, oh, okay. So as I'm hitting 7 irons out there, the ball's getting hit, and the bottom of the swing circle is actually, that far ahead of the ball.
Right.
Shocking, right? But if I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
this test with all my students, and I put the audible tile on, and I have the group walk up and hit one ball, so they're all watching, right?
Yeah.
Which people are nervy about, but they're all
Of
cool
course.
once we just say, hey, if you miss, you miss, who cares? We're all in the circle of trust, and you hit -2 inches, 0.0 inches, -1 inch,
Yeah.
1 inch, half an
Right.
inch, right? And then I have my coach walk up 4.5 inches. I have my other coach walk up 3.9 inches, 4 inches, you know what I mean? And so people realize that this big motion and how a body has a little bit of participation in moving that circle a little forward to create that offset speed to accelerate a club a little bit. And that's, you say, what's your one tip? I'd say my constant thing I battle is a crappy grip, the union of hands to club. The next big thing I battle is a pelvis where weight goes on top. We'll call all right-handed golfers, 15% of lefties. I apologize, but you're good at this. I would
Hmm.
say the next big thing is they take their right hip and put it over their right foot. And
Right.
right there, they're
Yeah.
dead in the water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Instead of getting that rotation of the way the
you know
pelvis
it.
is supposed to be because it's just
So,
an ellipse. Yeah.
yeah, it's totally an
Yeah.
ellipse. And so once you take your right hip and put it over your right foot, I'd say you're pretty much not going to break 80 ever.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
you might not break 90. So,
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is that I feel like sometimes when we teach golf, we don't really lay out the clear objective. Like, what is the objective in the golf swing, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, we're on a sideways, like we tell our students, like we're playing a sideways sport and we're hitting the inside part of the golf ball, which on like a
Yeah.
sideways angle is technically the middle.
Well,
But I feel like we just kind of skip over the main objective for students and we're just like, hey, let's jump right into it and let's get you gripping and turning and hinging. And they're just like, whoa, like what are we trying to accomplish here? And it's like,
Right.
we're trying to hit the inside part of the golf ball. We're on a sideways sport. The club head is pivoting around this point right here. So it's really important that we understand kind of the role of the lead hand, the role of the trail hand, like that can't be glossed over, right? So
Right.
yeah, that's definitely the it's just like I mean with Claw we actually developed like a little golf ball character and he's like our little mascot. We call him Dimples. And I just wanted people to think about their golf ball like it's like a pet. Like that's how I tell my students, like my juniors I teach. It's like, hey, this is like your pet. You're trying to keep him out of the water, out of the trees, out of the high wind, like out of the
Love
high
it.
rough, like trying to navigate him around the course. So then they think about it and
Yeah.
they're like, oh. And then he's got a team, which is the golf grip and the club face, and they're all kind of working together. And so you got to hold the grip right, got to navigate the club face, two dimples, and it's just a cool way to kind of think about it. But
No, dude, that's fantastic.
yeah, it's just the relationship with the golf club. I feel like it's just kind of lost a little bit, and that's why it's cool to hear like with your mentors. Is there how with Mo and things like that. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know how often people ask you about this. I'm sure you get asked it all the time, but what are some things that you picked up on from him that you feel like are maybe lost a little bit in golf instruction, or just tidbits that you just kind of took from him that have helped you a lot?
He was funny. He would just, always kind of hold his nose and go, "Ooh, that stinks." He would have this dramatic way of saying, like, if somebody had a really bad grip or something like that, he'd be hold his nose like it smelled bad. It was terrible. I think in Mo's case, he people always tried to duplicate what he did.
Mm,
There's people that said, okay, Mo is, arguably the straightest, most accurate hitter ever, and I don't know who could be ever better than him. I honestly couldn't imagine anybody hitting it straighter than him and more solid.
and far
When I
too,
say that,
right? Like he wasn't just straight;
reasonably
like he would
far.
hit it far.
No,
Yeah.
he could hit it, and he was a strong dude. Like, people don't realize he was probably 5'8", 5'9", but really like a fire plug. And then naturally the strength of just as many balls as he hit every day. Like, he's probably I don't know who would hit more balls than him ever. And
Really?
so he played golf most of his life with a, overlapping grip. Then as he got older, he went to a 10-finger grip. Oh, lost you there. Mo had an
Yeah, yeah.
overlapping grip for most of his career. And then
Hmm.
sometime I want to say in his 50s, maybe late 40s, he went to 10-finger, and basically, he'd always say, hoo hoo, this doesn't, these things have to communicate to that thing, meaning pointing at a club head. And most people don't know how to do that. And then, he'd always say, put this dumb guy on that dumb guy. That this dumb guy is the club head on that dumb guy is the golf ball. And then so with him, it was, again, a circular game where he did say some things that I knew to be incorrect, meaning like he would say his club head went straight back for 40 inches and straight through for 40 inches. Now, from your visual, perspective, you could probably see, as a club's going back up and in, it might look like it's going straight for a while, and it's going up the other side. It might look like it's going, but it's just on a circle. So he would say stuff like that. He would exaggerate, a club going shallow, when he was explaining it to people. I'm not sure that Mo helped golfers get better. I think Mo liked the enigma and the fact that he could do it and most people couldn't. You know, um, versus George Knudson. He was here. People would say to me, Marty, why don't you swing more like Mo Norman? And I'd say, well, I'll tell you what, Mo is a pretty unique guy, super strong, had his own way of getting the club on the ball, probably better than anybody. But like, he could hit it long, but he couldn't hit it George Knudson long.
Mm.
Like his whole, high handle
Yeah, yeah,
thing,
yeah.
you
Very
know what I mean?
older, and
Yeah,
then locked arms,
versus
locked legs. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, versus George, who had a bit more a speed opportunity through a bit of this accumulator, could hit it damn near as straight and probably 25 yards farther. And 25
Wow.
yards is a
Yeah.
lot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like back in the
Absolutely.
day, like Mo would hit it, a ball on a wooden club 250. Well, George would hit it 275, which was murdered back in the day.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
That's
So and
crazy.
then
Wow.
one looked a little odd doing it, and one looked classic doing it. So naturally he gravitated toward the classic look of a George Knudson versus an odd look like a Mo Norman. And I didn't begrudge Mo; he was amazing, and I was very, very grateful that he took an interest in my game and would like ask me questions like about and let me ask him questions and stuff. He did say some really cool things. Like, he would say, my hands go backwards when I hit it. So, where bad players' hands go forwards. So
I
he
love
would
that.
say, yeah, you know what I mean? When I hit it, my
Hmm.
hands go backwards.
Yep.
When, bad players hit it, their hands go forward. So, that's an interesting awareness that address and impact could be different places, supported by a pivot.
Hmm.
And then again, it's not to confuse the listeners out there, but when you're learning the game, you're probably feeling the weight of it go this way. And then when you're getting really good at the game, you're probably getting a situation where the body's, contributing to how that club accelerates and, applies power to the golf ball. So, there's a lot to it. Bottom line, it's an art, man. It's like I always say
We've
it's like
talked about
playing
him.
guitar.
We've talked about him a lot on the podcast, and
Have
one
you?
thing that we really admire a lot is how when he was starting his downswing, how his lead arm was almost like a wall that was allowing his lead shoulder and lead hip to kind of stay on top, so the trail side was kind of forced to work under. And I always like you
Yeah,
do that drill where you would like drop the club, and the
yeah,
grip would actually be pointing like up towards the sky.
yeah,
That's always like, I mean, I love getting my students to understand that because they understand how like the club is basically going at like a 45-degree angle relative to the target line. And then that's because we're on the sideways angle, and that's how the gear effect of the club is working. So yeah,
hmm
we've dedicated like almost a whole episode to just talking about him. And we feel like it's lost a little bit with some of the awesome things that he actually has contributed to golf instruction because of, like you said, there's some quirky things with his locked arms and his ulnar deviation and his locked
yeah,
legs, but with how well he understood how the club was pivoting from the top to post impact was just unparalleled.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and then his equipment too, right? He had super heavy, stiff gear, big grips. Normal rubber grips with this wrap around them that made them like jumbos. So
Mm,
he had really big grips on his clubs,
got it.
very heavy. Like if you pick up one of Mo's a 7-iron versus somebody else, he did a demo one time. He picked up a club, and he'd pick up a pro's club and pro equipment's usually heavier than amateur equipment anyway. Like the shafts are always 20 grams heavier, just an extra stiff shaft versus a regular.
Hmm.
The a pros club, when you pick it up, you're picking up something like it's a battle. It's a battle thing. It's like different
Yeah,
than
yeah.
something you pick
It's
up
like a
on the,
weapon.
it is.
Yeah.
And then yet Mo's were even like beefier and heavier than those. So
Wow.
yeah, it was like I remember Nick Price, okay, Canadian Open. I'm probably 12, and there's Mo walks up on the range, and Mo could walk up on any range he wanted to. People would let him, and pros would stop what they're doing, and they'd give Mo a 7-iron. He wouldn't walk to those ranges with a bag of clubs on his shoulder since he wasn't playing in the tournament. But he would grab somebody's club, and he'd pick up Nick Price's club, and he'd joke. He'd go, hoo, super light. And meantime, Nick Price has probably got a extra stiff tipped 7-iron.
Yeah.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so
Because he had
here's
quick
Mo
tempo
saying,
too. So like
totally sure
yeah,
he
he
did.
needed stiff. Yeah.
And Mo did as well. But
Mhm.
then he would go on. Mo would look at it for 2 seconds, kind of calibrate line loft that Nick Price had, and just start flagging Nick Price's 7-iron like it's never been flagged before.
Yeah,
And Nick Price is like as good as anybody's ever been too as hitting a golf
yeah.
ball. And here's Mo randomly picking up a stranger's club, not even his club, and different size human. Nick's Price probably 6 foot tall. Mo's a shorter guy. Mo had different equipment set up, and yet he would just go look at it quick, make some sort of mild adjustment, and just start flagging it. And then pros would stop and watch because everything came right out the middle of the face. It was a sound that most pros couldn't do. Like they'd hit flush shots and they're the best in the world, but they weren't as automatic as Mo was.
Yeah.
You know what
Just
I mean?
pepper
It
in the
wasn't
middle of the face
yeah,
over
it
and over.
wasn't it
Yeah.
wasn't mildly skinny or a little bit thick. It was like middle of the face, stupid divots that looked like you couldn't chisel them out of the grass like that.
Yeah.
Like he was
Like a
such a
dollar
freak.
bill.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, his divots were, unbelievable how consistent of a delivery Mo had to the golf ball. And just he earned that. He earned that through just his love
Digging it
of
out of the dirt.
practice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just digging it out of
his
the
love
dirt,
of
right?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, and I haven't been able to actually personally thank you, but for the claw ball, I received, for our viewers that don't know, I received a text message from Martin saying that you were using the claw ball in your academy.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, like, that meant the world to me. Like, we've been working so hard on just trying to help our students develop a better relationship with the golf club, and it almost, I thought it was like fake at first. Like I looked at, when I saw the message, I was like, Martin Chuck, like no way. And then
Yeah.
once I dug a little deeper and talked to our mutual friend or whatever, but
Yeah.
what was your first initial impressions on it? Because it's
Oh,
definitely
I
different
loved
than a
it.
lot of
I love
training aids that are out there.
You know
So
what? it's to me, it's fantastic because, like when you put both hands on it, right? So whether you're right-hander or left-hander, it kind of gets you in the claw ball, it gets you in this position, of a lead hand. Now, if I just hold it with one hand sometimes and show people,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
listen, that's where I kind of started. And then at some point, the mass of the club will change my wrist condition. So
yep,
I'll have them, put both hands on. And then the neat thing about it is it shows people how fingers are really important to an extended wrist.
right, right,
Rather they
true.
just grab it like palmy and they have this terrible grip and they can't create leverage. So now when they get their fingers on it with their, extended wrists,
Yeah, they
now
feel
they
like the
can rotate
curl.
this thing. Yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
get the curl and you got the nice little, valleys for the fingers to go in. And then the other cool thing is that the dimension you have of just the lip to the golf ball is only enough for the fingers. Then you got your
Right.
little thumb things there, your little thummy guys. And so you
Mm-hmm.
put these hands on really nice. I'm like, wow, okay. You can kind of feel this sense of extension with the hands. And then I just have people go, okay, hold it left hand only. And then they feel, okay, there's extended lead wrist. I call it a soft bent back left hand. And nobody, I swear, this position you'd think is like, oh man, what would it be like taking castor oil when you're a little kid? Like people
Mm-hmm.
hate
Yeah,
putting a
yeah,
bent left hand on. And I'm not talking rolled, I'm just talking bent. And then I
correct.
explain to them how this
How
flow
it changing a
happens.
little bit. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so with the claw ball, people can go, okay, that's kind of the feel I'm supposed to have. Yeah, it is. And there's a lead hand. So I get them both hands on for first. And I just say, hold it with your lead hand and then go ahead and curl it into your forearm a little bit and feel what that's like.
Yeah, I saw
And
that
here's
when
a,
you
t-
sent me that video of you doing that with one of your students. I love that.
and so we all take our own liberties with training aids. And when my friend Chun said, "Hey, you got to check this guy out," like he obviously saw a passionate coach who's like really into helping students expand their ability to get better, right? So teaching grip is it, man, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's basically what I do every day, all day, because most of my people, you know what I mean? I'm not seeking to teach tour players. It's of little interest,
Right,
absolutely none actually, if you care
right.
less. If I get a really good player who calls me up, great. I've got one mini tour guy now that I kind of have a soft spot for, and I'm trying to help him, so, and it's like, here's an example. I'm trying to help him. Okay. Like this guy's really good. Okay. This is the comedy of it. This is how people need coaches. He's complaining that he's hitting his wedges left. He's a right-handed golfer. Okay.
Okay.
Let me get a wedge to show you what
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
showing.
Mm-hmm.
So, so this guy, super talented. Okay. So there's grooves, parallel to the camera. You know what I mean? Give
Mm-hmm.
or take. Okay. So I said to him, I go, buddy, when the grooves are parallel to when the grooves are coming parallel to the ground, this is your best shot to hit a wedge straight. If the handle comes in low, guess where the loft's pointing? And he's kind of looking at me quizzically, like the leading edge doesn't necessarily mean the face is pointed there, because if the handle comes in low, now your loft's pointed left. And so he's like looking at me like I just discovered Mars. Okay.
Right. Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? And here's a
Yeah.
guy that's like a +5 handicapper. And I'm like, dude, when you're hitting these 20, 30, 40-yard pitch shots, you can't have the handle way down here. He's kind of getting lazy in his setup. He's too hip hinged. His hands are too low. Even though this edge is pointed right at the target, the handle's too low, and then therefore you're creating an impact where the face is pointed left.
Mm,
And then you're
right.
going to swing more to the right to fix it, and guess what you're going to get? More hook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so,
That's a common like better player problem with the pressure that they're applying to the handle. Like we look at the worst players, they're not pushing on the handle enough. The club's almost like kind of this way
go
too
down.
much. And then better players
Right,
are more like that. So
right.
it's cool how he was probably thinking it was like something so much more complicated. And then you just describe that to him and he's like, "Oh, okay,
I know, like
that's
mind
wild."
blown,
Yeah.
right? So
It's like
here's a
they
guy who's
almost want
so
it they want it to be harder almost, right? They want to kind of dig a little deeper. It's like, no, just
Yeah,
simple, just dynamics of how the lie angle works at impact.
yeah. Stand the shaft up a little bit more, you'll hit it straighter. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
absolutely.
that's going to hook it all day long, right? And so, or you're going to fight to not hook it, but just the comedy of it. So sometimes you go, people can get really good despite themselves almost. And when you blend athleticism that this kid clearly has a ton of and desire, you need a little bit of a soundboard, and that soundboard's a coach. Just say, hey man, here's a couple little basic things so that you find your golf ball more. Because at the speed he swings it, like 7 irons, like 100 miles an hour, drivers 120. He's just physically gifted, and it's not even
Right.
hard for him to hit it that far.
Yeah,
4 iron flies
exactly.
240. You know what I mean? It's like, what? I wish I was that fast. I'm not. Back to my 100 yard dash speed. Some
The
guys are
80.
just
Yeah.
really fast, and some guys aren't.
Right. Yeah. It's funny with the claw ball, I use my Tour Striker Smart Ball with the claw
Cool.
ball. So I have my
Yeah.
students, so I have them kind of put it between their elbows and then get
Yeah.
the claw ball and kind of just match up the circles. Because if
Okay.
you got the circle of the claw ball here and the circle of the smart ball back and
Mm-hmm.
through, they kind of just
Yeah.
understand how they work together, right? Because
That's cool.
yeah, it's like the push is something that I feel like isn't really talked about a lot in golf instruction. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
data starting to come out, and I've been talking to some kind of people that have been collecting the data of like, hey, we're starting to censor the golf grip, and we realize that better players are gripping it tighter. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but you can't just tell the average golfer to just like squeeze it harder. Like
Mm-mm.
they're very concentrated with how they're actually applying the pressures to the handle. That's why we go so in
Mm-hmm.
depth with talking about like taking the fingers and flexing them back, curling the fingertips. Like we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
pre-activate all of the pressures that you're actually going to be applying to the handle. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a little firmer, but it's never like the worst thing you can do in golf is a squeeze. And now they're starting
Yeah.
to get all this data and they're like, oh, these better players, because the handle's kind of misunderstood, right? It's like the brain. It hasn't really been censored and measured and figured out. We just
Yeah.
nerded out about it, and we're figuring out a lot of cool stuff that's helping a lot of our students. But it's not as simple as just like, oh yeah, just grip it harder. It's like it doesn't work that way. So
No. No.
how do you talk about it when it comes to the grip pressure and things like that?
So I would go back to I had a neat experience. I think learning how to grip it came to me from George Knudson, and then also my study of when I was a little kid. I loved golf books. I would go sit in the bookstore and watch and read all the golf books, and then buy one when I could afford one. And I loved looking at Ben Hogan's hands on a club, the wrinkles in the back of his index
Hmm.
finger.
Yeah.
How his hand and how that like Arnold Palmer's grip looked and Ben Hogan's grip, and certain grips were just gorgeous. And Jack Nicklaus is a little bit, didn't look gorgeous, but obviously highly functional. But to your point, as I got a little farther along, when I was a young man, when George passed away when I was 19,
Hmm.
and my next coach was a guy named Mark Evershed, so he was into the golfing machine. Well, that led me down the road of kind of learning about Ben Doyle. And so Ben Doyle
Man.
always said, hands are like sheepdogs. Okay, if you don't train your sheepdogs, they won't get your sheep. And so
Right.
his whole
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
was like,
I
yeah,
love
you can
that.
have sheepdogs, but they're not going to bring the sheep back unless you train them. And he goes, basically you have to train your hands and, how they get on the golf club and what they need to expect. So I try to get people to kind of, hey, this is what you can expect. One of my big things is I'll take a little piece of grass or something. I'll say, okay, here's a little ant, and I'm going to put this little ant between the backside of the grip at 9 o'clock and your index finger. I'm sorry, 3 o'clock, and
Hmm.
your index finger pad. And I'll say, don't kill the ant, even at address. There's no squeezing the ant to death. I said, when you change direction, the club might kill the ant, but you're never going to kill the ant.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, people would say, and then I'll tell you what, manipulating grips. My campers that come to my school, my camp's expensive, so it's like mostly adults between 45 and 90. And to your point about like clampy hands, I'll reach into some, lady who's like 65, 70, and I can feel her squeezing the crap out of the thing. I'm like, come on, dear,
Yeah.
loosen up. Let's swing this thing. I said, hands naturally tighten because the grip is like I said, it's fatter on one end than it is on the other. When you swing
Right.
it, the thing's going to want to naturally tension.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And so in
Yeah.
a natural tension, you'll hold it appropriately. So it's like you don't have to squeeze the hell out of it. Like learn how to move the weight a bit. And while you're looking at a golf ball, Ben Doyle would always say, eyes on the ball, mind in the hands. Eyes on the ball, mind in the hands.
Mm.
So you're looking at the inside aft part of the ball, okay, to your point, inside back quadrant, and yet you're always feeling what's going on here. So every swing is just hands, 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 not to be handsy, but just to let the golf club do what it needs to do.
Yeah. Yeah, handsy's definitely like gotten a bad rap. Like people get really scared when it's like, oh, I don't want to be known as handsy. It's like if you understand like how to apply the proper pressures to the handle to control the dynamics of how the club moves, it's
Yeah,
good to be handsy. Like bad
right.
handsy is when you don't push against the handle and the gear effect of
Mm-hmm.
the club starts kicking back against you and you're flipping. But if you're pushing
Mm-hmm.
against the handle and using your hands properly, like yeah, handsy. Yeah, like we're handsy and we're
Gotta
proud.
be.
Yeah, like
Handsy
it's
and proud.
yeah,
I'm gonna make
people.
T-shirts that way.
I know. Yeah, we've joked about this actually. That's why I started laughing when I said it because we talked about this in like season 1 of the podcast, and people were like, "I want
Mm-hmm.
shirts on that." So we should do
Right.
some shirts on that.
I'm gonna bring up one guy just because he asked me, like Peter Croker, the Australian coach. I don't know if you know who Peter is.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if you
Hmm.
don't, he's great. He's a mentor of mine too. And so, there's, a lot of golf machine like pressure, the pressure points in a golf swing. I
Hmm.
have the book here somewhere. It's always within pretty near, it's always nearby and it takes a bad rap, but I mean, there's, learning how to get, your hands in the right place to feel where the weight of the club and how we keep, this pressure away from us and how it does lend itself to, the correct forces that create leverage
Hmm.
and hands that don't come apart and the sense of how the weight's going to affect the hands and basically these are the things we play golf with. You know what I mean? So you got to learn what to expect the club to present to the hands and what the hands have to present to the club, like all the work you're doing, and that's how you eventually build a swing that can get the sweet spot on the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you've been seeing. I mean, I know you use gears. It's part of like
Mm-hmm.
your academy, right? Like that's day
Yeah,
one. People come in, they get tested, they get measured.
yeah, yeah.
What's some things that you're kind of maybe studying that you kind of weren't expecting, or maybe some things that you would like to still measure that aren't currently being measured? Like what I ask all my guests this of kind of what's some things that are currently being measured that fascinate you or aren't being measured that you wish that were.
Well, I'd say that to the golfer, we call it the donut of death. Okay, I always just joke that the donut of death is a hand path that tracks onto itself. So what I'm saying is, like, if a student makes a swing on gears, it tracks, the hand path and the club head. And if the hand path goes back on one circle and comes down on the same circle, you're a terrible golfer. Meaning, typically, they'll go to the right and they'll come back on the same. They'll have a low point that's goofy. Whereas a good player, they'll have a wider backswing and a narrower downswing for a variety of reasons. As a trail arm's going back, it tends to be a little wider, and as it's going down, it's loaded because a weight's fighting it, and so that the width of the hand path should change, and then you add into it body pressure going a little bit more toward the lead side as you unwind. That changes the dimension of the backswing circle to the downswing circle. It's a massive knowledge nugget for somebody to go, oh my God, I have never saw that before. They always think the swing, they might see it as an inclined circle like a hula hoop, but they don't realize it's like one hula hoop shape going back and the other hula hoop shape coming down. They're
Right.
different hula hoops. Okay.
True.
And then the other thing is, where the face is pointed in delivery. Like most of the time what we see, when a club's in that critical delivery position, the face is wide open. Whereas good players tend to have it pretty much ready to hit a shot. The bad player has the face pointed too vertical, too skyward, and then their brain says, "Hey, you got to slam it shut not to hit it to the right." Where the better player, the face is kind of, ready to, it doesn't have to do much from that tenth of a second from parallel to the ground to impact. And so we try to teach people, hey, there's a reason why gripping is so important. So at the face, when you create leverage, it doesn't get too wide open, and then your brain takes over and goes, man, we want to make the brain's job. It's going to be active and busy just because it has to be, but it shouldn't have a million calculations to figure out in a golf swing. It should only have 100,000. So if we reduce the calculations by 90% for the brain to calculate a ton of things, but less, they're going to play better golf. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you talk about it too with your students, to where you say it's like, do all your thinking before you get over the ball. Like have your idea of what you're trying to accomplish, and then step up over the shot and just let it happen. Focus on your ball, focus on the target. Don't get over the ball and then just paralyzed and thinking about like 100 different things. It's like we tell our students, like, you get a backswing thought and a follow through thought. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's like, where do you want the club to be positioned at post impact, and where do you maybe want to have it at the top or something, maybe underneath the right shoulder, not to pitch this way. And then just, that's it. And then you're over the ball and just ding under the right shoulder, ding, club head, maybe right field for some, down the line for some. Yeah. So I like that a lot. So yeah. Do you feel good about the industry though? I mean, do you like where everything's going with golf instruction? I mean, I always kind of end the podcast with just asking people, like, what are you optimistic? Are you happy with where things are going with technology? I mean, we have awesome tools like Coach Now. You got me introduced with Spencer. I mean, Coach Now has been incredible for my teaching. It's really changed my life as an instructor. It's made me have more time away from kind of lessons to where I can not have to pull up my mic and do a recording, put it on Swing Catalyst. Like, it was just always a nightmare. Now it's like I got my iPad right there. I'm in the lesson. I do the recording in my lesson, and then I just upload it right there. And then maybe I'll do some notes or jump in front of the camera with my compact club. But
amen, brother. Like, I think Coach Now has been a game changer. And, I've been on it now since 2013. So I've got almost 4,800 students in there, which is crazy. And it can manage, that many students with a little help from my assistants. But, it's, I think the industry is, it's as good as it. Here's my, parting thoughts here, because I got to go shortly. But it's a game where we swing the weight of the golf club. Like, I want coaches to be as passionate about the handle and the grip as you are. That's what I would say. If you give me a coach like you, I guarantee I'd send. If I could say, hey, you got to go see the Ethan guy. You know why? Because he's going to teach you how to swing the weight of the club with good hands. And then from there, if you have good hands, and it's almost hard to be bad at golf. It's almost hard to be bad.
It is.
Okay.
It really
most
is.
Coaches, they don't want to, like, somebody comes and they've had this poor grip, and it's like, and the old adage, change a grip and lose a friend. I don't mind losing friends.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
You're not trying to be their friend. You're trying to be their coach.
Exactly. I'm going to explain to them leverage and how they don't have it, and how they don't have face control, and how they don't have rhythm. And if they want to fight me, that's fine. They can go see somebody else. But if they just stick with me and they learn how to get the club in their hands nicely to where they can leverage it and feel rhythm and feel the face, man, they're on their way to having way more fun playing golf. And so to me, all the fancy equipment that we can use is nice. And to me, it just is a way to present an argument, so that when you understand the argument, you go down the road of helping somebody get better. That's what technology helps with. And for the better, like, really high level player digging out like a little bit more performance, Swing Catalyst, or really kind of noodling in on path and face, great. But for the majority of people trying to go shoot 82 or 79 or 88, and you know what I mean? It's like, to me, go have fun with good hands. You're going to play way better golf.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thanks. This has been surreal, honestly.
Oh,
I mean, like I said, when you texted me that you were using the claw ball, it was really meant a lot to me. And
I appreciate you, man.
hopefully we can continue this relationship and we can maybe collaborate on
Absolutely.
some content moving forward.
Love to.
I got all Martin's information linked down below, guys. Go and subscribe to the podcast. Go look at all his content on Instagram, YouTube, all the kind of channels I'll have linked below. So thanks a lot.
Man.
Really
Ethan,
appreciate you
thanks,
meeting
pal.
with me.